So I'm going to hand it over to Devin and Laura.
Thanks so much, Danny. And I just want to say, we'll all miss you. But very excited, Kim, to have you on board, and Ben, of course. And just good evening, everyone. It's so wonderful to see you all in this virtual space. And as Danny said, happy holidays. I'm Laura Knudsen, and I am with the Environmental Protection Agency in our Pacific Northwest region, Region 10. And I am a community involvement coordinator for the Portland Harbor Superfund site. But the reason I'm presenting tonight is because I also support the Lower Duwamish Waterway Superfund site, which is in Seattle, Washington. And it was listed as a Superfund site in 2001. Also a sediment cleanup, similar to Portland Harbor, but has many differences too. And at Lower Duwamish Waterway, we did an application of a program that I know many of you are familiar with, but some of you may not be, and it's called the EPA's Superfund Job Training Initiative. And so we're going to talk about generally the program. That's why my colleague Devin Martin is on, which is we're very excited to have Devin on tonight. He's joining us from the East Coast because he's at EPA headquarters. I know many of you are online too from the East Coast, so thank you all for being on. And Devin, thank you for being on so late. And he's with the Community Involvement and Program Initiatives branch in the Superfund program and headquarters. And he's the program lead for the Superfund Job Training Initiative. So we're going to do just a couple slides with Devin because we have so lucky to have his expertise here tonight. And just about what the program is and go over some of those really core principles. And then we'll go into the case study. I'll be presenting that, and I have a special guest with me tonight who I'll introduce when we're on that. Start my slides, but please feel free to put in questions throughout the presentation in the chat, or it's fine if you want to raise your hand too. And then we'll have time at the end for either some group questions or we might do breakouts depending on how we are looking for time and how people are feeling. So with that being said, Devin, I'm going to hand it off to you if we could go to the next slide, and feel free to introduce yourself again. Thank you, Devin.
Yeah, that's great. No, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Don't use Zoom often for my job, so just making sure. Yeah, as Laura said, I'm Devin Martin. I'm with EPA headquarters out here in Washington, D.C. I have been the program manager on this great program for the last 7 years now. And it's one of my favorite things to work on. I'm sure everyone in their jobs has many hats, and this is my very favorite Sunday best hat that I get to wear. So I'm just going to talk a little bit at a very high level about the program and talk a little bit about how it works. And then Laura's going to talk specifically about its application at Lower Duwamish Waterway that will hopefully put the flesh on the bones of the skeleton that I'm going to lay out. So you have a good picture of Super JTI by the end of this. And I'm going to refer to it from now on as Super JTI because I have to. Once you start working for EPA, you have to abbreviate everything. So when I say Super JTI, I mean Superfund Job Training Initiative. So at a very high level, Super JTI is an EPA-funded job readiness program that's designed to give community members impacted by Superfund sites in the community opportunities to go to work cleaning up the contamination in their community. So it is a free to communities environmental remediation and cleanup training program. There are a few important things that I want to say about Super JTI because we function a little bit differently than a lot of the government-funded job training programs. Many of those are grant programs. They're sort of longer-term, established sort of schools. I refer to us as a job training SWAT team because we are specific to Superfund sites. We are trying to act fast within the timeline of a Superfund site cleanup to provide opportunities that might not otherwise be there. So when we're talking about a job training initiative project, we're usually talking about a couple to 3 weeks of training. And I also describe us as a SWAT team because no two job training projects look the same. They are entirely tailored to meet the needs at the site, and that would be the needs of the community, the needs of the potential employers at the site, the needs of the Superfund site work. Because all Superfund sites have different needs. So we are very flexible to be able to fit the timing and whatever is appropriate to deliver the job training at that site. So I also just want to say we've gone through a presidential transition. There's been a lot of uncertainty about programs. Our program is continuing to be supported. So we're very fortunate to continue to be able to deliver this service to communities impacted by Superfund sites. So if we could go to the next slide, I'll sort of talk through what a Superfund job training initiative program looks like. So I've made the boxes different colors here because I think about a Super JTI project in 4 phases. The first phase, being the light blue, is the planning phase. The teal phase, we're talking about our team building. The purple phase there is we're doing the training. And then the final phase there, we're getting into the working. So I would talk right now about the first 3, this sort of first box of potential planning with EPA and our potential employers and our site partners. And our site partners include not just the potential employers, but folks in the community, because we want to have a community-built training program. So we know we're meeting the needs of the community at the same time. So as we do our planning, we're deciding whether or not this is, what's the right time for a job training project. We're figuring out who needs to be involved. We're figuring out what are the potential employment opportunities out there, and what do the graduates of our program need to be trained in to meet the needs of the potential employers, so that when folks walk out of our training, they can walk directly into a job that they're qualified for. So all of these conversations at the beginning we're doing a lot of work on the front end to make sure everything goes smoothly once we get to the training portion. So the second box, we're confirming the number of jobs that might be available so that we scale our training program appropriately. And we're also getting the specifications for the job. The next phase, once we know sort of how many jobs we're looking at and what the certifications they'll need, then we'll start finalizing what our training program looks like. So that's the planning phase. We're trying to figure out what does our training program need to train for, and who needs to be involved, and what does it look like. Once we've got that plan in place, then we start our team building. So we hire a local community partner for all of our training programs. Our training program is operated under a contract that we have right now. Our contractor will create a formal subcontract relationship with a community organization or an individual. We refer to this as our eyes and ears on the ground, because we're coming from Washington, D.C. Our contractor is coming from a few different places across the country. We like to hire an organization locally to help us carry out the training program. So they'll help us find a venue to do the training program. They'll help us identify organizations within the community who we should be advertising to, the appropriate methods to reach communities, et cetera, et cetera. All of the things that we need local knowledge for to make sure that our program is successful. We'll also hire local training providers to provide the actual training courses. So Laura can talk a little bit about some of the specifics of what those training courses were for Lower Duwamish Waterway, but we're always looking to have local training providers do the actual trainings. So once we have our plan, we have our team together, then we start the fun part, the training portion. So we start out with a recruitment and screening process, and that is typically done through advertising, whatever is appropriate for that site. It's typically radio, social media. I think Laura will give some more examples about that as well, for what that looked like at Lower Duwamish Waterway. Once we've recruited, we've brought folks in, we do informational sessions to let folks know what to expect, that these are typically construction jobs, make sure they know what they're getting into, learn a little bit more about what the training program looks like, what their certifications would be, what work they would be qualified for at the end. And it's also just an opportunity to make connections. Once we have people interested, then we get them into our training program, and then we carry out 2 to 3 weeks, maybe more, depending on what is needed, that we figured out during the planning phase. This is the fun part, getting folks built together as a training cohort, and getting through our training program. Once folks have received all of their trainings, they've got their certifications, they're ready to go, we always end our training programs with a graduation. And this is just a great chance to take a pause and celebrate all that has happened, because these projects usually happen very quickly and it's a whirlwind. And so it's a great opportunity for us to take a moment to just celebrate the graduates. It's also a good opportunity to get potential employers in and talk to our graduates again with their certifications, and sort of bridge into the next phase, which is the working phase. So after we complete a training program, we provide 6 months of support to all of our graduates after to help facilitate employment opportunities. So hopefully we've done a lot of that all the way through, but we're continuing to support our graduates for 6 months after the fact. And that's the life cycle of a Super JTI project. I know that was a lot of information. I think I saw a question pop up, but one of my wife's least favorite characteristics of mine is that I can only unitask. I am not a multitasker. So if somebody wants to read out that chat, I'm happy to take that question, or if there are any other questions before we talk specifics.
Sure, Devin, I can read it out for you. Thank you. Great slides. From Michael, we have, do training programs ever focus on working on remediated sites, or is training usually focused on cleanup?
It is focused on cleanup. Our authority that we get out of the Superfund law is specific to hazardous waste cleanup. So we do focus on the environmental remediation, not typically on sort of the redevelopment opportunities or other things that may come after the remediation. Great question, though.
Yeah, that's a good question. Any other questions for Devin right now before we go into the Lower Dolmetsch Waterway case study? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands right now, but Devin, thanks for staying on too, because I'm sure there'll probably be some other questions pop up later. Thank you. We can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the case study for the Lower Dolmetsch Waterway Superfund site. And I want to thank the steering committee for selecting this as the main topic tonight, because the Superfund job training initiative, which is Super JTI, it has been a core focus of the Portland Harbor Superfund site too. We haven't done it at Portland Harbor yet, but it's been something that has been talked about for a really long time. And it's in the community involvement plan, the EPA community involvement plan, as something we're going to do in the future. So it's exciting that we have an example at a site close by too that's has a lot of similarities. And so before I get started, our special guest tonight is the remedial project manager, who in this picture, so this is a picture of the graduates who were incredibly bright, very positive, a lot of amazing energy. And also in this particular cohort too, there were a lot of people who had some experience already. Like some people didn't, some people did. It was an interesting mix. Some folks came with master's degrees. And so I think it depends a lot what's going on in the economy too, depending on who comes. And so that was an interesting piece. But the info sessions, as Devin was mentioning, are open to everyone and anyone. But I want to introduce the remedial project manager from the Lower Dolmetsch Waterway Superfund site, who spearheaded this really important work and did a beautiful job partnering both with Devin and then the contractor Skio for Super JTI. So Nasreen, do you want to come on camera really fast? She's in this picture too, but you'll see in a moment. And introduce yourself if you're on. Okay, awesome. How are you gonna?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm on camera. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you. I had a lot of fun doing this pilot program for the Lower Dolmetsch Waterway. I freeze up?
You're okay for now. Oh, I think we might have lost her. Oh, wait.
I
Okay.
was frozen, so I'm turning off my camera now. Now you've seen my face, hopefully. Um, yeah, okay. Can you hear me now? So,
Yes.
all right.
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
I don't know how much you heard or how long I was talking to myself, but I just wanted to say I had a really awesome experience doing this pilot program for the Lower Duwamish Waterway that's up in Seattle. I'm a remedial project manager that works on that site. And we had a really great group, and it was a really good learning experience. And I'm happy to share some of the lessons learned. We're hoping we can do more of this in the future and apply some of those ourselves too. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Nasreen. And please feel free to jump in on any of these slides too if you'd like to add anything. And Nasreen will, along with Devin, will be able to help answer some questions. These slides, Nasreen put most of them together, so thank you. We're going to go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So this was last year, so recently that this training was done for the Lower Duwamish Waterway Superfund site. There was a previous, like a while ago, there was another offering that had been done many years ago. But this was like the first really, I think it was the first training that was closer to the actual construction of the Lower Duwamish Waterway Superfund site, because right now, last year was the first season of construction for the Lower Duwamish Waterway Superfund site, which is really exciting because similar to Portland Harbor, it took a long time to get to that point. And so this training started, I think it was it was in the early fall, right? No, when did we start it, Serena? I'm trying to remember.
It was like late August and kind of finished in early September.
Yeah. And then construction started last year in November, but usually it's October. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a timeline for this. But yeah, so this was very exciting to be able to do this. And so these are the trainings. So we just wanted to start with this slide because this is a list of the trainings that were covered during the Super JTI curriculum. And this list was this was created because Nasreen did a lot of really good upfront work on communicating with the performing parties, but also the contractor that was going to be doing the work. And these trainings are really helpful for, Superfund cleanup work or similar types of projects too. So, there's the hazardous materials, waste operations and emergency response 40-hour certification, the OSHA 10-hour certification, CPR. So these are, you can read them all on here, but they're really good trainings just in general. They're, universal and applicable to many different types of work on cleanup and or construction sites. So, Devin, I know may talk about this more too, but, we definitely really would like some of the graduates to be hired, by to actually work on the Superfund site work. And at the same time, any job, that they are able to get from having done this training or, in part because of this training is great too. So I will say, for instance, that we'll talk more about this later, but, some of the students actually in this Super JTI cohort were interested in a lot of things. Like they were interested in maybe doing some kind of technical work, but they were also interested in maybe doing like communication support as well. So even though this is really supposed to be a program that focuses on, more technical training and work, it could be applied to other realms too. These trainings, could be useful in other fields for the cleanup or other, related environmental fields. And the program started, like Devin said, with the work readiness skills training, which includes, things like how to prepare for and conduct an interview, how to prepare a resume. And the graduation, we'll talk about that in a minute. That was something else that really kind of connected everyone together too. The other thing I want to mention on this slide before I see if Nasreen has anything else she'd like to say is the Bluebeam construction software. So that's the third one from the bottom here. And that I think is not typically, it's not always put into the curriculum for the Superfund job training initiative. So you can, but it can be, and you can, right, when you're doing that scoping in the beginning, if there are trainings that or certifications that are particularly useful for an area, let's say Portland, or for the particular project or work, if we can scope those out early, we can work with Devin and his team to see if it's not guaranteed that could be something that's put into this curriculum, but it's a possibility, right, that it could be tailored. And the Bluebeam construction software was something for this training that was put in because that's really helpful for all types of engineering and construction work. And the students, Nasreen did a great job scoping this out. She actually got, worked to get some actual design drawings from the Superfund cleanup, the Duwamish Superfund cleanup, to use for that part of the training so that the students could really learn, with that as an example of actual design drawings. So very, very cool. We've also heard, I know this isn't something that was still very much scoping this out, and this is something that might not actually materialize. But one of the pieces of feedback we heard too is that commercial driver's licenses are a very useful thing to have, and that's that can be a lot to add into a training like this. But that's something that Nasreen started to look into, maybe for something in the future, potentially, like if this training is offered again. Nasreen, do you have anything you want to add? And also Devin, but Nasreen first, you.
Yeah, that was very thorough. I think you covered pretty much anything I would have said here. But we did get a lot of this directly from the contractor who was doing the Superfund cleanup. So that was kind of the main starting point. And but we also tried to collaborate with some other local priority hire groups and sort of got their buy-in as well that these would be useful. And like Laura said, most of these are pretty universal for any type of similar work. And there are a lot of projects happening or coming up in the area related to the cleanup or upland cleanup sites. And so we were hoping that, we knew that there would maybe not be that many positions to fill on the actual Superfund cleanup. So we wanted to make sure that they had other options too. And the commercial driver's license thing, I think, I started doing some research. I'm happy that it's not it's not off the table. I think it's just, these can be tailored. And so if you find a local school that covers all that and covers all the different components of it, including like the hands-on driving, that's really important. But it seemed doable in the limited research that I started doing for this. So yeah, I would encourage you, if you wanted to include a certain type of training, it would help you to do that research ahead of time so you can show that you found there are local vendors that teach it, that it's not too expensive, that it can be done within a certain amount of time. That would help your case.
Thank you so much. Great points. Devin, anything you wanted to add?
No, nothing to add. You did a great job of illustrating the flexibility of the program and how we tailor it to each site. So, nope.
Okay, thank you both. That slide I definitely wanted to get more input on. The next slide, please. So this slide, we just wanted to mention that one of the things that's really great about the Super JTI program too is that they help do some analysis on how people heard about the program. And so, everywhere it can be different, right? But just some interesting data points here is that for the pilot at Lower Domish Waterway, these are some of the main pieces where people heard about the program. And so we had enough space for about 20 students in the training that we did as the pilot training last year. And because Nasreen mentioned earlier that we were doing the training in August, we had tried to start scoping it earlier, but it's a lot to have kind of pull together for sure, even with the amazing support of the headquarters Super JTI program. So that was August, and then the graduation occurred later that fall, and then construction started sooner. So we didn't have a lot of time to advertise, but SKIO, the contractor, for EPA for this work, really helped a lot with all of that. And we did our best to advertise, and work with them as the site team on the ground to advertise through as many venues as possible, and work with our partners. So that's, you see the newsletters, community groups. There's a bunch here as well, which obviously for Portland Harbor applications would be crucial as well. We'd be partnering with everyone here, many of you here, so thank you. So community newsletters, social media, newspaper ads, flyers. But you can see, by far the social media was the best way of reaching people. And that's how a lot of students found out about the program. I did meet a couple of people who ended up joining the cohort who did see some flyers, and that's how they found out about it. So some people, flyers in the area for this site were helpful still too. And just a reminder, feel free to put anything in the chat if you have questions again throughout too. No pressure though. So we're going to go to the next slide, please.
I'll just add, it was
go for it.
Part of the time constraint with outreach for this was that we had to wait until after the contractor was hired, and there was, from that point until when they were going to start work, we had a very limited window to advertise and lead the training, and so that was part of it. We wanted to time it so that they finished the training in the right timing to be considered for the project. And we had been talking with the contractor the whole time, but then it seemed like they had already made their hires before we had even done the tryouts for the training. So that's a tricky part, that until you actually know who's doing the cleanup, it's kind of hard to coordinate that, but hopefully you have a little more time.
That's such a good point, Nasreen. Thank you. And this just shows you, I know not everyone would be familiar with the Seattle and greater Seattle area, but this part of the other analysis that the Super JTA program does is where the graduates came from. And so this shows that students came from all over Seattle. And we had a total of 16 students that applied and came to the tryouts. So they were all accepted because, as I said before, we had space actually for more. But 16 were in the cohort. And one thing that's important to mention here too, and Nasreen, if you want to add anything else after this, please do, is that the goal, right, for this program, like Devin was mentioning earlier too, is that we want to try to include anyone from the community who's impacted by the Superfund site. So that doesn't just mean people who live in the nearby neighborhoods, which in proximity wise are very much impacted by the Superfund site. So in South Seattle, there's South Park and Georgetown are some of the main neighborhoods that are right along the Superfund site. But so obviously people from there, very important to engage, but also people who use the river for recreational activities including fishing, who might be coming from somewhere else, are important to include as well. So the advertising, was broader, right, than just like the area right around the river. Nasreen, do you want to add anything? Okay. All right. Next slide, please. So
I do see a quick question in the chat about
no,
your
West
Seattle representation.
Doug Larson, nice. So the graduates, we did not have any graduates from West Seattle, but I know we did. I'm trying to remember an answer. I'm sure I feel like we did advertising there because that's something that we've heard a lot from community members in the areas that West Seattle needs to be advertised to. So,
pretty wide net, and including like the Seattle Times and social media, which I think, but we did a lot of flyering, and West Seattle is pretty close to the site, like Del Ridge area. That's all part of West Seattle, and that's considered part of the community around there. South Park and Georgetown are the two neighborhoods that are adjacent to the river, and we didn't get anyone from Georgetown either, and I think we had one person from South Park maybe. So it was pretty mixed. We had like each of these areas had one or two people from those areas, so it was pretty spread out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cassie, I see your question and we'll get to it in a moment. And great questions. So let's go to the next slide, and then we'll go to Cassie's questions in a moment before we do the Pearl and Harbor specific ones. So as part of the graduation ceremony, one of the things that was done at this site that was different than other super JTI sites was that EPA and SKIO, the EPA contractor who supports this, hosted a mini job fair. And so there's a few pictures here. Well, the picture in the upper left-hand corner that's of the whole room is the mini job fair. And we did this because there are, as the list here is of all the companies that were involved. Some of these are also involved with Portland Harbor, some of them. And the purpose of this mini job fair was to introduce the students to more types of jobs that could be available to them with the certificates that they had completed. And so students brought their resumes to this mini job fair, and we connected, and Nasreen did a lot of work to connecting with all of these different groups. And so the students could ask questions of the employers and also agency representatives. So you'll see, ecology was on there. I mean, EPA, we had some information at the time about hiring. And so it was informal and casual, and we, worked to connect people and make sure everyone was, organically being introduced. And so the students met a lot of people. It turned out really well, to be a big success for networking. And we were really trying to connect students with potential jobs there too. And, so a lot of the groups on here are affiliated with the Superfund cleanup. Not all of them are, but it's important to just note, that on here. So Pacific Pile and Marine is the main contractor right now for the upper reach portion of phase of the Lower Dolmish Waterway Superfund site, but there are a lot of subcontractors too. And so a lot of them on here, came as well to this mini graduation, and students, gave speeches. They had the chance to congratulate everyone for their hard work as well as part of the graduation. So it was a really good time. And we were trying, there's a lot of job training programs and opportunities already in Seattle that some of these, companies are tied into, or groups are tied into. And we had been trying, Nasreen and I, to also, try to have it maybe be a bit of a broader connection to those groups. But what we found, and Nasreen, if you have questions, more questions about this, she can answer them beautifully. But we found a lot of those groups were really busy with their own work, and it was hard to kind of connect them in, because we wanted to try to, make more connections where we could, get folks into priority hire programs that were existing had existing structures with like the city of Seattle and King County. So Nasreen, do you want to say anything else about that?
Yes. So we tried early on to coordinate with some of these priority hire groups. We knew going into it that we would probably not have a high rate of graduates getting job on the Superfund cleanup. But because a lot of it is pretty specialized. If the work involves working on a dredge, on doing that type of work, the training provided here is very, I don't know, I would say a good start, a good base training, but there's other specialty trainings that they might need. And so we wanted to at least get them introduced to some of these skills. And then some of these priority hire programs have like apprenticeship programs. There's just so many things already going on in Seattle. I know it's the same in Portland too. So we were hoping to connect them with some of these other groups and say, okay, now you have this training, you could go on if you wanted to and pursue an apprenticeship. The few people from the priority hire that did get hired for the cleanup, they have many years of training and have gone through like apprenticeship programs and are part of these unions. So and like I mentioned earlier, we found out, I think on the day of the tryouts, that they had already made their hires. Pacific Pile and Marine had, for the cleanup. So, but they came to this job fair, and a lot of it too was that not necessarily expecting them to be hired that year right away out of this program, but to make connections. And then we're going to be cleaning up this river for quite some time. So there will be other contractors and more work in the future, and more upland site cleanup work. So it was really all about making connections. And I think everybody who showed up had a really great time. The speeches were really moving, and we made sure to follow up with them and get them resumes. And so there's been a lot of introductions, and they know these people. If they wanted to come back and continue to pursue this work for future years, I think they'd have a good chance. But it's sort of on them after a certain point to follow up. Also wanted to say that the Washington State Department of Ecology was there, and they wanted to hire everybody, but they were and have been in a hiring freeze. And I just heard today that they no longer are in a hiring freeze, and they're ready to put out some advertisements soon. So that's something that we can pass on to our graduates.
That's wonderful. That's great news. Thank you so much.
Oh, and then I see, I'll let Devin answer the questions about citizenship and age. I think the answer is yes to both of those, but do they learn about the cleanup and related issues? Yes, they did.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I missed the end of what you said, Nasreen. I got a couple pop-ups during this that I might not have a good connection. So hopefully I stay going, but I'm going to take those two questions about the
Okay.
requirements. They are generally yes. We as a program, because we tailor every training project specifically to what is the employers would need, we sort of inherit their requirements. And for sure, for hazardous waste machinery construction, there's a legal requirement that you have to be over 18 for that. So even though our training program wouldn't in itself be exclusive, the employment opportunities after would be. So we would inherit that need. As far as citizenship goes, I think at least legal status would be required for employers. So I don't know that citizenship is the requirement, but yeah. So generally yes to those two questions, with caveats to both. And then I see Laura's questions about learning about the cleanup and related issues during the training. I can speak from like a national perspective. That varies depending on the site. Many EPA site teams like Laura and Nazarene would take the opportunity on like the first day of training to have a short session to say, hey, this is the work that was going on and this is why it's important. This is what the cleanup is and the related issues. So yes, there are some training projects where the timeline is so short, we don't want to waste a single hour because we want to make sure people have an opportunity. So site teams will say, we'll get them in a community meeting. We won't include it in the training.
Thank you, Devin. Great questions, and thank you, Nasreen. For Cassie's question about graduates actually hired for the Superfund cleanup. So Nasreen, I know, said that there wasn't any, but everything that she said about the networking and in the future it was kind of laying the groundwork. That's why we did call this a pilot project. The other thing I want to mention too is that so I talked to a couple of the graduates because I talked to one of them because I saw them at a different job fair because and we'll get to this on the next slide before we close soon and can take other questions, but we and SKIO stayed in touch with the graduates, gave them other information about job fairs around the area too after they graduated. And I saw one of them at a job fair in the area, and they were just saying that one of the things they were actually thinking about and were inspired to do, because they were such a close-knit group, and I haven't followed up with them to see if this happened, is they were actually thinking about maybe starting their own company and maybe trying to and I don't know what happened with this. I just liked that other ideas came out of this training too that were kind of creative, and maybe finding some niche subcontractor kind of position that could somehow support the work. They had come into the Super JTI training with a lot of background as well, so they were inspired by connecting via the training as graduates to maybe explore some other options, since they weren't immediately hired for the cleanup, but just wanted to mention that. So next slide, please. So for Duwamish, I just want to mention briefly that future plans are that we want to continue to network with local employers at job fairs and promote as best we can. Right now things are a little short on staffing and stretched a little bit thin to do this work on the ground, but our ideal situation would be that we would have enough support and people to be able to do promotion at job fairs and other community events for Super JTI, because we would love to do another offering if possible. Now, Devin, we have to talk to Devin and everyone there for Lower Duwamish Waterway in the future, because it's not, another offering isn't necessarily guaranteed, but it's something that can happen. It's possible. A lot of other Superfund sites have done multiple offerings over the years, because these cleanups can go for a while, right? So that's really what I wanted to focus on this slide, just kind of what the next steps are. And next slide, we just wanted to thank too the partners from the Lower Duwamish Waterway Superfund site pilot project, Super JTA pilot project here. And I want to go ahead and go on to the last. I know we don't have a ton more time. So Nasreen, do you have any last thoughts about the program before I go into some Portland Harbor specific slides briefly?
Just that I had an idea, and I sort of touched on this the other day with Devin, and it seems like there's openness to this at headquarters, but I thought it might help to do, as Laura mentioned on the previous slide, doing networking with local employers, maybe in a proactive way. If we could convince local employers and contractors, to hire these students, maybe we can guarantee that we would provide them this list of training, and so it might help be an incentive for people to hire, knowing that they wouldn't have to pay $10,000 or however much to train those people, because there's a lot of value that each person gets out of that, and knowing that they'd get to apply it right away would be appealing to headquarters. So that's maybe something to consider for the future.
Thank you, Nasreen. Next slide, please. So I just want to mention that for Portland Harbor, thanks, there's something called, which many of you may know because many of you on the call and on the meeting tonight have been helping with this work, this important work, and thank you so much. It's called the Community Impacts Mitigation Plan. And this is a required document that it identifies potential impact to the community. And it also outlines actions that the performing parties and the construction contractor can take to limit the impacts. And so for Portland Harbor, we have been working, and you're supposed to have it in advance of the start of construction for remedial action. And so for Portland Harbor, one of the things, because Super JTI, it's in the community involvement plan, the core document for the site, and it's been, as I said before at the beginning, discussed for many years. It's in the community impacts mitigation plan, the draft one right now, that we're continuing to finalize based on all the great feedback that you all provided. And it is also a living document that will be updated. But there is an excerpt from section 4.7 in it, which is the job creation and loss. And it mentions, right, that EPA will implement Super JTI at the site in the future. And Devin and I have been talking for years about this. And I talked to Devin's, the person who was working on this before Devin too, about this. So I know headquarters is supportive of doing this at Portland Harbor. And the other thing at Portland Harbor that Caleb, our Portland Harbor team lead and RPM, could talk about more if folks are interested, and others on the call, on the meeting too, is there other regional workforce development efforts that we know are going to be happening in the Portland area around the time of the cleanup. And so trying to coordinate and partner with those folks. We've started some of that already, thanks to some of the great recommendations some of you have given to us to increase the likelihood that community members trained, for this site cleanup can also work on other projects too. That's something that we like and see an opportunity already that's outlined in the community impacts mitigation plan. And that's pretty much it. You can read through the rest, but next slide, please. The other thing that we have in the community impacts mitigation plan as recommendations, so it means we can't require these things, but it's recommendations based on everything we've been hearing, lots of community feedback, is that we really would like, Nasreen talked about the importance of, that coordination with the contractor, and then, their subcontractors too, that's really important, and to know, first of all, who that is, but also just that's an important piece. And so we really would like to see, the performing parties who are doing the contracting and subcontracting, have some expectation of coordinating and hiring participants from the Super JTI program and local apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs. So that's kind of the synopsis of this slide. And next slide, please. And then we also have in the current version of the community impacts mitigation plan, accountability and communications section, for that same job section, that just says that we, regardless of, what happens with Super JTI, we're going to be monitoring it and looking at the quantitative and qualitative success and reporting the status update to this collaborative group, minimum of twice a year. And that will also update folks on the status, in written form too, via the story map and other channels. So that's, I know we don't have a lot more time, but next slide, please. We do have some questions that I know we don't have time to break into groups, but that's okay. That we'd love if you would like to, if anyone would like to add, and I'll hand it off to Danny and team and Kim and Ben to help facilitate any questions that come in or any hands that are raised. But if you have any clarifying questions, please, this is the time. Or there are some questions that we put here that we'd love to get your feedback on, and we can, send these out later too, and just let us know anytime, because as we're crafting the plan for a pilot program for Portland Harbor, we'd really like to think through some of these. So, what might cause challenges for a pilot program at the Portland Harbor Superfund site? What are other trainings that could be good to consider integrating into the pilot program? So, we talked about the Blue Beam construction software. We talked about commercial driver's licenses. Those were ideas that came up for Lower Duwamish Waterway. What about Portland Harbor? And, are there other organizations? I know, Portland Harbor Community Coalition and others have tied us to a lot of organizations that are amazing already. But, if there are other organizations that doing job training work that could be good partners for this work, that would be amazing information to have. And then we just wanted to mention, similar to kind of Duwamish, the timing for this question number 4 is about 3 to 6 months out before the start of construction, which for Portland Harbor is right now, and this is obviously tentative caveat, but could be early 2028 is when we'd want to kind of look at doing this pilot project training for Super JTI, with the thought that later on in the year construction would start. So yes. Oh, great. Emergency management training. Thanks, Laura. That's great. Any thoughts from anyone else? Or anyone would like to raise, if anyone would like to come off mute, you can, but please use the chat too. If you have thoughts about any one of these questions, or if you have a separate question. Cassie. Ooh, some good.
Oops, sorry about that.
Okay.
I must have missed this. I thought construction, you all were hoping to start at 2027. When did it shift to 2028?
Caleb, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I can handle that. So the schedule hasn't changed. It's 2027 is the goal to sign the consent decree. But realistically, when we sign the consent decree, that's when cleanup officially starts. But there will be a period with which the PRPs will have to get their cleanup contractors on and subcontractors and develop their plans to mobilize in the field, and then working within the fish window. It may very well be the actual physical in the river work may be the 2028 work window. So that's when we refer to 2028, it's not that that's the shift in when we plan to start cleanup. It still will be upon signature of the consent decree that will oversee cleanup, and that is March of 2027. That remains the goal.
Okay, thank you, Caleb, for that explanation. I don't understand why. I don't really understand why Super JTI ideal timing is only 3 to 6 months prior to start of construction, when most likely RFPs will already have gone out, as it sounds like they already did. They already made their hires for Duwamish by the time the JTI program was completed. So why would we not make a national Super JTI decision to have more time to allow for even additional trainings to allow graduates to actually be more qualified to be able to get these positions?
That's a great question. Devin, do you want to maybe just start with that, and then we can?
Yeah, sure. I can start with that. So I want to reiterate what I said at the beginning of is Super JTI is sort of like a short-term training program. So we're typically talking about, a couple to a few weeks of training. We're not like a long-term training program. We're designed to fit in that short window between when contractors know who is going to be doing the work on the site, so we can talk to them, find out what their needs are, and we can deliver them trained candidates for those positions that they would need. When we say start would be 3 to 6 months, we're talking about when flyers and social media would start going out in the community. I think we're already in the training or in the planning phase for the Portland Harbor Super JTI program right now. Like this conversation is part of that planning. But just the other thing I want to reiterate is many of the certifications that we provide through Super JTI usually have a 1-year time limit on them. So we are trying to make sure that our candidates would still be qualified when the time is right. Laura, was there anything you would add to that?
I don't think so, but Devin, do you have thoughts on, because it is tricky, because I know like what I mean, and that's why we wanted to talk through this case study, because with, like Cassie was pointing out, and we covered for Duwamish, Lower Duwamish Waterway, the fact that the contractor, I think I don't know, I feel like, Cassie, we had talked to the contractor before they had hired, and they knew about this. They were very involved too. Nasreen, you don't have to say anything about this, but I think because it was in this case, right, it was the first, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think that when the training occurred actually could have been really well aligned with their hiring. But the problem kind of came that they were, I would say, somewhat, they were very busy with starting the first season of construction. That contractor I don't think they've done something quite to the scale of a Lower Duwamish Waterway Superfund site in the past, that kind of work. And so they became somewhat inundated. And I think that is contributed to them not being quite as like on top of coordinating with us on that hiring. And maybe that's something we could foresee or change a little bit for Portland Harbor for sure. But Nasreen, do you agree with that? I just want to kind of get at that.
I do think maybe we could have had the training a little earlier. I think the 3 to 6 months is the training itself, but that doesn't mean you can't start planning for it much sooner. You can start doing the outreach and getting the word out to people that there will be this training. And maybe if we had it closer to like the time of the award for the contract, it might have aligned a little bit better. So they were awarded the contract in May, and we had the training at the end of August. And there were informational sessions that started early August leading up to that. And then the construction was to start October 1st. No, they started a little bit late. We were cutting it close, and we were trying very hard to coordinate with a lot of the local priority hire programs. And I think that was our biggest challenge. So I would say you can start planning ahead. But once that contractor gets hired, maybe that's when you want to time the training.
Yeah, and I would just emphasize also that this 3 to 6 months it's not set in stone. Like we're still very much in the planning phase, and we're open to what is the appropriate timing for a training project at Portland Harbor.
Great question. Thank you, Cassie. And Zora has a good question in the chat. Devin, I'm going to give it to you. So what would be the criminal background check requirements? And if we want to provide job opportunities to a wide section of our community, these might need to be adjusted.
Yeah, great question. I'll reiterate what I think I said before is we as a program don't have criminal background check requirements, but if the employer does, we would make sure that any graduates applying know that to be eligible for these jobs, you may need to pass a background check. We have done background checks as part of the training program, just as a service to the contractors, but not ruled anybody out if they did not pass it. So again, that's one of those flexibility things of, the employers, we don't have control over what their requirements are, but we try to do our best to communicate expectations both to our graduates, trainees, and to the employers of what we're doing. So great question, important issue, one that is sticky no matter which way you cut it.
It's a really good question. And is there a follow-up question? Can you influence the contractors?
I'll defer to the RPM in the room for that.
Yeah, as Nasreen, since you had the connection with Pacific Pearl and Marine in the case of Duwamish, did you want to?
I think the answer is legally no.
Yeah,
we can build connections with them and encourage them, but we can't tell them who to hire. That would not be an appropriate use of our authority.
Any other questions or thoughts? And we'll, like I said, we'll send these questions out later, but okay. Well, I know we're a little bit over on the agenda, so thank you all so much. And it's so good to see everyone and really appreciate the great feedback in the chat too, and verbally as well. And thank you, Devin and Nasreen, for being on. We really, really appreciate the collaboration on this. Oh, Zora has another question. Will these be considered federal hires or local? So yeah.
Say
okay.
local, because they're not being hired by EPA.
Yeah. So it's the contractor who would, or subcontractors who would be hiring
Right.
them.
Sorry, I froze again. EPA would not be the ones hiring them, so they would be local hires.
Great question.
Great.
I'm gonna hand it back to you, Danny. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have more questions, please feel free to reach out. As Laura said, we will send these questions out as follow-up. And also as a reminder, you will have access to all these slides through the final meeting packet, which is in your inbox and also was posted earlier in the chat.